Chinese Emperor. To become the Emperor of China, you might start as a king of a warring state, or even a rebel leader, but once you conquer the land, the old title of king is no longer enough. You take the title Huangdi, meaning emperor, to show you are greater than all the rulers before you. You are now the son of heaven. This gives you the absolute right to rule, known as the mandate of heaven. However, this power comes with a catch. If you fail to rule well, or if natural disasters like floods and famines strike, people will believe you have lost this divine support, justifying rebellions to overthrow you. Until that happens, though, your word is law, and your written orders are sacred edicts. You are so far above everyone else that no one is allowed to say or write your given name, as it is a strict taboo. You even use a special word for I, Zhen, which no one else can speak. When people approach you, they must perform the kowtow, bowing deeply to show respect. As the amount of land you own is pretty big, you govern through a massive bureaucracy of officials chosen for their skill rather than their family name. Then, to protect yourself, you might connect defensive walls into a single great wall to stop northern nomads, or build massive canals like the Linku to transport supplies. You are constantly watched, and you live in a palace with an empress, who is the mother of the nation, along with many consorts and concubines organized by rank. You hope to pass your throne to your son, usually the eldest one born to the empress, to keep your dynasty alive, but danger is everywhere. You might face assassination attempts by enemies hiding weapons in maps, or musicians swinging weighted instruments at you. You also have to worry about the people inside your own palace. Eunuchs, the servants who run the court, can gain enough power to manipulate you or forge your will after you die. If you inherit the throne as a child, your mother, such as what happened with Empress Dowager, might rule in your place. Eventually, your dynasty will fall, and a new one will take the mandate of heaven, a cycle that continues for over 2,000 years until the last emperor steps down in 1912. Inca Emperor. If you're the Sapa Inca or the only emperor, you are worshipped as the direct son of the sun god Inti. Your journey to the throne does not strictly follow birth order. Instead, you must prove yourself through rigorous physical and moral trials to show the gods have chosen you. Even as time passes and the position becomes more hereditary, you are never guaranteed the crown simply by birth order. Your father, the current Sapa Inca, looks for the most capable son, not necessarily the oldest. He might test you by making you a co-governor during his lifetime to secure your succession, just as Pachacuti did with his son. Once selected, you rule Tawantinsuyo, the massive realm of the four regions, and you wear the Mascapaicha, a royal fringe on your head, while holding a golden scepter. Your life is one of extreme luxury. You sit on a golden throne called an ushno, and you don't even have to walk. You are carried on a litter by noble lords. Your primary wife, the Koya, is often your own sister, ensuring the royal bloodline remains pure, and she acts as a powerful advisor in your government. You do not use money. Instead, you demand a labor tax called mita. In exchange, you provide food and clothing from massive state storehouses to anyone who is hungry or old. You're also likely a master builder, commanding the construction of thousands of miles of roads, hanging bridges, and massive stone fortresses like Sacsay Huaman. You also act as a general, expanding the empire from Ecuador to Chile, perhaps even sailing to distant islands on rafts like Tupac Yupanqui. However, the lack of a clear, fixed succession law remains your greatest danger. Because the most capable son is supposed to rule, your death can trigger a brutal crisis. If you die suddenly from a disease like smallpox, your sons might tear the empire apart fighting for the throne, just as Huascar and Atahualpa did. This division leaves your empire vulnerable, and if you're unlucky, you might see 168 weird people arriving from the sea. You might underestimate such a small group and agree to meet them unarmed at Cajamarca, only to be ambushed and captured. In a desperate bid for freedom, you offer to fill a room once with gold and twice with silver. They accept the ransom, but they do not free you. Instead, they accuse you of treason and execute you by strangulation. That's exactly what happened to Atahualpa, the last Inca emperor, when Spaniards came to his land. Persian Emperor. To be a ruler in the Achaemenid Empire, you are born into a life of strict education and immense expectation. You are raised by eunuchs until you are 7 years old, learning to ride horses and hunt. After turning 14, you are taught by 4 aristocrats who make you learn ethics and morals. They teach you the core values of your ancestors, mostly that fear is slavery and that you must always tell the truth. Once you take the throne, you hold the supreme title King of Kings. You might also call yourself King of Countries or King of Babylon. You rule over a massive, multi-ethnic empire filled with Medes, Elamites, Assyrians, and many others. To keep control, you appoint satraps or governors who are usually your Persian relatives. You also rely on the Royal Road, a 1,500-plus mile ancient highway, to keep your vast territories connected. Buildings are important to showcase your power, so you work on grand projects, such as the Gate of All Nations and the Hall of 100 Columns at Persepolis. War is still your primary duty, though. You lead huge armies to expand your borders. You might march into Egypt, defeating the pharaoh, as at the Battle Battle of Pelusium. You might even use your enemy's beliefs against them, placing animals they consider sacred, like cats and sheep, on the front lines so they refuse to fight back. Once you win, you adopt their customs to gain legitimacy. You become the pharaoh, claiming to be a descendant of their gods, Ra and Horus, and you pay respect to their deities. However, this is mostly to keep control. If a city like Babylon rebels against you, you might tear down its fortifications, punish its priests, and melt down the gold statue of their god, as happened during Xerxes the Great's rule. If you try to invade Greece, you might have to build a bridge of boats across the ocean at the Hellespont. If a storm breaks your bridge, you might order the water itself to be whipped 300 times as punishment before building a new one. Xerxes likely really did that, by the way. Despite your power, you constantly face revolts from conquered lands like Egypt and Babylon, where locals try to crown their own kings the moment you show weakness. You must crush these uprisings quickly, or the entire empire will likely fracture. Even inside your own palace, you are not safe. Powerful courtiers, eunuchs, and the commanders of your royal bodyguard are often plotting against you. If you show weakness or fail in war, they might sneak into your room and assassinate you, leaving your sons to fight over the remains of your empire. British Emperor. To rule the British Empire, strangely enough, you usually do not hold the title of emperor. For centuries, you are simply called a king or queen, though your laws declare that you wear an imperial crown. This distinction is vital because it signifies that you possess a sovereign dignity and answer to no superior power on earth, not even the Pope. Your position is defined by a delicate balance between your royal authority and the will of Parliament. Unlike other emperors who have absolute power, you generally cannot levy taxes or pass laws without the consent of your government, and your reign is often marked by the struggle to manage these internal political powers while acting as the supreme governor of the church. You also do not always send armies to conquer. Instead, you grant royal charters to private organizations like the East India Company. These joint stock companies raise their own armies, mint their own coins, and govern vast territories in your name, particularly in Asia. You also rely on the Royal Navy to secure the oceans, protecting the trade routes that make your wealth. In the early days, you might even tacitly encourage privateers to raid the treasure fleets of your rivals, like Spain, using state-sanctioned piracy to weaken your enemies and enrich your treasury. Your reach is truly global, eventually covering a quarter of the Earth's land area. You fight wars on every continent, clashing with France, Russia, and indigenous powers to secure dominance. If you lose major colonies, as you might in North America, you simply shift your focus to the Pacific, Africa, and Asia. It is only much later in your history that you officially adopt the title of Emperor or Empress, and even then, it applies specifically to India. You take this title to assert your paramount status over hundreds of local princely states and to signal that you have succeeded the Mongol emperors. However, the cost of maintaining such a vast domain is immense. You face constant rebellions and the need to defend borders thousands of miles from home. The economic strain of global conflicts, particularly 2 world wars, eventually leaves your country bankrupt. In the end, you oversee a process of decolonization, where your former subjects become independent nations, and your role transforms from an imperial ruler into the symbolic head of a voluntary commonwealth. Byzantine Emperor. To be the Byzantine Emperor, you must accept that you are the guardian of the Roman legacy, but your world is centered in Constantinople, not Rome. Once you are crowned, usually because your father was the last emperor, you take the title Basileus, meaning sovereign. To your people, you are the highest ruler on earth, and from now on, you have to act like it. Your daily life is designed to show the public that you are pious and respectable. Your day begins not with breakfast, but with prayer. You walk from your room to the ceremonial hall to pray before an icon of Christ, repenting as a servant of God. As another example of the behavior you must follow, when you walk to the great church of Hagia Sophia for the big outings on major holidays like Easter or Christmas, you must remove your crown before entering, a custom followed since the 5th century. The line between your political power and religion does not exist. On Palm Sunday, you walk through the streets decorated with laurel and olive branches while the people sing, adoring you. On Holy Thursday, you copy the Bible by washing the feet of 12 poor people. You distribute apples and baskets of gifts on holy days. Every action is a performance to prove you are God's vicegerent. Inside the palace, your status is so high that you are forbidden to speak to foreign representatives. When envoys from Italy or other lands arrive, you sit in silence for security and to show your superiority. A high official called the logothete speaks in your name while you remain a silent, distant statue of power. However, you cannot stay in the palace forever. Your empire is often under attack from Persians, Avars, or Arabs. When you go on long military campaigns, you send letters back to the Patriarch of Constantinople describing your success. He reads these letters to the people in St. Sophia so they know what you are doing. If you are victorious, you return to the capital for a massive triumph. You process down the main street surrounded by torchbearers and the smoke of incense, followed by your guards, your prisoners of war, and the trophies you captured. However, the reality of your reign is often brutal. You might have to melt down church treasures just to pay your army. You might defeat the Persians and recover the true cross, only to see your empire crumble again under a new invasion from the Arabs. You may lose vast territories like Syria, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. You might try to fix religious divisions with a new doctrine, only to be called a heretic. Mongol Emperor. To become the Great Khan, or Khagan of the Mongol Empire, your path is not guaranteed by birth. While you might inherit property as the youngest son, the title of Khan does not automatically pass to you. Instead, you must be elected at a kurultai, a massive assembly of nobles and commanders. If you are chosen, you become the supreme ruler of the largest contiguous empire in history, a title that signifies you are the universal ruler destined by the sky god Tengri to conquer the world. Once you become the Great Khan, you do not rule from a stone palace, but from a mobile court of thousands of yurts. Since thanks to your military campaigns you're pretty rich, you likely reward loyalty with immense generosity, sharing the spoils of war equally among your followers. However, there's a problem. Since your society is divided into different families and tribes, maintaining loyalty is pretty hard, as people might listen to their clan chief, for example, instead of you. To fix that, you create units of tens, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands, where different tribes mix, so every single soldier is loyal only to you, and not any other authority in their own tribe. War is the engine of your empire. You lead campaigns that terrify the world, from Siberia to Persia. Your army is also a master of psychological warfare. If a city resists, like Nishapur or Herat, you might order its complete annihilation, killing every living thing to send a message. This makes other enemies fear you, making it much more likely that they surrender to you immediately. You use every tool available, adopting siege engineers from China and administrative experts from the Muslim world to govern your vast empire. You also establish a network of message writers, the Yam, to communicate across your empire faster than anyone else on Earth. Despite all the wars, the biggest threat to your throne is likely from within your own empire. Not only your own brothers and sons might fight over their inheritance, such as what happened when the empire split into rival Khanades like the Golden Horde or the Ilkhanate, but there's also the shamans. They might try to turn your family against you, forcing you to kill them to maintain control. When you die, they likely bury you in a secret spot, perhaps near a sacred mountain, and the soldiers who carry you there might kill anyone who sees them to ensure your final resting place remains a mystery forever. Russian Emperor. If you wanted to become Emperor of Russia, being the son of the previous emperor was an advantage, but not a guarantee, since the rules of succession were changed to allow the monarch to appoint an heir, and there was no fixed, universally respected succession law for much of the imperial period. The path to the throne is dangerous and unstable. You might inherit the crown peacefully, or you might have to seize it through a palace coup, relying on elite military regiments to arrest your predecessor, who's likely your own spouse or father. Once you secure the throne, you are the emperor and autocrat of all Russia. From now on, your power is absolute and unrestricted, as obeying you is considered a command from God himself. You are seen metaphorically as the Tsar Batyushka, the dear father of your subjects, and you hold supreme authority over the church as well. Even if you rule from the modern, westernized capital of St. Petersburg, where the court speaks French, you must travel to the old capital of Moscow to be legitimate. There, in the Cathedral of the Dormition, you undergo a religious coronation. You are anointed and crowned with the massive Great Imperial Crown, a symbol of your power filled with nearly 5,000 diamonds. Your reign is split in two different sides. Parts of it are still connected to its ancient traditions, while parts of it are becoming more and more modernized, following the rest of Europe. However, your primary goal is expansion. You send your generals to push the borders in every direction, south against the Ottomans to gain access to the Black Sea, west to partition the lands of Poland, or east into the vastness of Siberia. Your empire is built on the backs of serfs. Millions of your subjects are bound to the land, owned by the state or by private nobles. You personally own huge numbers of them. To keep the nobility loyal, you might grant them more rights, freeing them from compulsory service while allowing them to sentence their serfs to hard labor in Siberia. This creates a dangerous disconnect, though. While the common people might revere you as a distant father figure, they blame the nobles for their suffering. This means that if they feel you have been replaced by a false or unjust ruler, they may launch massive, violent rebellions that threaten to tear the empire apart. Your existence at court is one of extreme luxury but constant paranoia, so you rely on a circle of powerful favorites and ministers to govern the vast territories you have conquered. You might reward them with thousands of serfs and vast estates to ensure their support. Macedonian Emperor. Becoming the king or basileus of Macedonia is often a violent and chaotic process. The risk doesn't stop once you are acclaimed king by the army and the leading aristocrats either. You must immediately secure your position. This often means eliminating potential rivals, such as cousins or half-brothers who could challenge your right to rule. Once you do that, you are the head of state, the chief judge, and the high priest, performing daily ritual sacrifices to the gods. Most importantly, you are the supreme commander of the military. You do not lead from the rear, though. You are expected to fight in the front lines alongside your troops, risking injury and death to prove your courage. You rely on a close circle of companions, or hetairoi, who are aristocratic cavalrymen and your closest advisors. You are also served by royal pages, adolescent sons of nobles who guard you while you sleep and help you onto your horse, training to become your future officers. Your reign is defined by constant warfare and expansion. You might subdue neighboring Greek city-states, becoming the leader of a league to unite them against a common foe, like the Persian Empire. Your campaigns can take you thousands of miles from home, conquering vast territories across 3 continents. Because of this, you seize immense wealth from foreign treasuries, allowing you to mint gold and silver coins and pay off your soldiers' debts. To secure these new lands, you found dozens of cities named after yourself, establishing centers of Greek culture and commerce far from home. Ruling such a diverse empire requires difficult compromises, though. You might adopt the dress and customs of the people you conquer to gain their support, such as wearing a Persian diadem. You might also marry foreign princesses, potentially several at once, to seal diplomatic alliances. The risk is that these actions can alienate your traditional base, though. Also, your own soldiers, exhausted by years of campaigning, might mutiny and refuse to march any further, forcing you to turn back or worse. Unfortunately, plots against your life are common. You feast and drink heavily at symposia, but these parties can turn deadly. While you're drunk, you're weak, and people can also act irrationally while intoxicated. If you have not secured a strong heir, your generals, the Diadochi, will start fighting each other, tearing your empire apart to carve out their own kingdoms, as happened to Alexander the Great. Aztec Emperor. To become the emperor of the Aztecs, you start as a high-ranking noble. You go to a special school called the Calmecac to learn discipline and religion. You must also prove yourself as a brave warrior and a devout priest. When the throne is finally empty, you are not simply given the crown because your father was the emperor. Instead, a council of nobles, elders, and priests have to elect you from a small group of candidates. Once chosen, you become the Hui Tlatoani, which means great speaker. You are now the absolute ruler, the high priest, and the top military commander of the Triple Alliance. Your life in the palace is filled with extreme luxury. You never wear the same clothes twice, and you bathe every single afternoon to stay clean. You drink spiced chocolate from golden cups, and you wander through your own zoo, the Totokali, looking at eagles, jaguars, and snakes. When you need to think or meditate, you go into a special room painted entirely black called the Black House. However, you also have serious work to do. You do have a second-in-command called the Siwakwatl to help you, but still, you have to make the big decisions. For example, if one of the numerous droughts brings starvation, you have to decide if it's wise to open the royal food stores to feed your people. War is also a constant part of your job. You likely have a dense network of spies, so you can make detailed plans on how to conquer enemy cities, but rebellions are popping up pretty frequently. You might fight to expand the empire south into places like Zokonochko, but you also fight something more peculiar, flower wars, where the goal isn't just territory, but capturing prisoners for religious sacrifice. You also have to pay attention to bad omens, such as a comet or a burning temple, which warn you of disaster. You're not the only one who believes in them. Your society does too, and so does your army, and it weighs heavily on morale. And if you happen to be emperor in the empire's final days, strangers will arrive by sea, and your world will change. You see, they have strange, exploding magic sticks that kill people when pointed at them, so you try to welcome them with gifts of gold and silver, only to become a prisoner in your own home. You lose your power, and in the end, you die after being killed by the same strangers you tried to befriend. Egyptian Emperor, Pharaoh. If you wish to become the pharaoh of Egypt, you must prove you are the rightful heir, but your coronation is more than just a ceremony. It is a transformation. During the rituals, you receive a living royal Ka, a divine spirit that makes you a god on earth. You are the incarnation of Horus, the falcon god, and the son of Re, the sun god. Your names change to symbolize this new reality. You take on 5 royal titles, including a Horus name written in a palace square called a serek and a throne name enclosed in a protective oval called a cartouche. Once you wear the double crown crown, the red for the north and the white for the south, you are the absolute master of the two lands. You have total absolute power. You own every inch of soil, every grain of wheat, and every life in your kingdom. You're also the only person who can communicate directly with the gods on equal footing. While priests perform daily rituals, they do so only as your deputies. Your primary duty is to maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order of truth, balance, and justice. You must repel Isfet, or chaos, which threatens your borders in the form of foreign invaders like the Sea Peoples or Libyans. You lead your armies personally, or at least you're depicted doing so, smashing enemies with a mace or shooting arrows from a chariot to show your divine strength. Your life is filled with immense wealth, but also responsibility. You organize massive building projects, commanding thousands of workers to construct temples, obelisks, and your own tomb to ensure your journey to the afterlife. You control the Nile's flooding through rituals, ensuring the harvest that feeds your people. However, if the Nile fails to rise, or if enemies invade, it is seen as your failure to uphold Ma'at. You must then navigate the politics of your court, where your own wives and officials might plot against you. Even in death, you are not done. You become Osiris, ruler of the underworld, while your successor takes on the mantle of Horus, continuing the eternal cycle of divine kingship. French Emperor. To become the Emperor of the French, you do not need to be born into the position. You might start as a successful general or even an elected president. Your path to the throne will very likely require a coup d'etat, seizing absolute power by dissolving the National Assembly. To make your rule legitimate, you can rely on the plebiscite, a direct vote by the people. Millions need to vote yes for you to create your empire. After that, you take the title Emperor of the French rather than Emperor of France to emphasize that you represent the people. Once crowned, you act as a modernizer. You might rebuild Paris, tearing down old neighborhoods to construct broad boulevards and grand public buildings. You develop national infrastructure, such as a massive railway network, to boost the economy. You reform the laws into a standardized civil code, guaranteeing equality before the law and protecting property, while simultaneously censoring the press and limiting political dissent. You create a new aristocracy based on merit and service to the state, awarding honors like the Legion of Honor, rather than relying solely on old bloodlines. Your foreign policy is aggressive and expansionist, as you aim to make France the dominant power in Europe and beyond. You might annex territories in Italy and Holland, or expand your reach into North Africa and Cochinchina. You often attempt to install your own relatives or puppet rulers on foreign thrones, from Spain to Mexico, to bring these nations into your orbit. However, your power depends entirely on success. You face constant coalitions of rival powers like Britain, Prussia, Russia, and Austria who fear your dominance. If you mishandle a diplomatic threat or launch a disastrous military campaign, such as an invasion of Russia or a botched intervention in Mexico, your support collapses. When enemy armies defeat your forces, capture you in battle, or march on Paris, your own legislature will declare you deposed. You are forced to abdicate, and unlike monarchs who die in their palaces, your reign likely ends in exile, banished to a foreign country or a remote island. Roman Emperor. To become the Roman emperor, you usually don't start in a palace. You likely come from a poor family and join the army at 20. After years of fighting, you climb to the top of the ranks, and then your big moment comes when the old emperor dies. The Senate in Rome might choose his brother or someone else in his close family to take over. But if Rome's soldiers chose you as their emperor, the Senate can't do much but accept you if they want to keep peace. Wearing the purple robe brings massive titles. You are Augustus, meaning elevated, and Imperator, the mark of a victorious commander. You hold Imperium Maius, giving you supreme command over every other official, and Tribunetia Potestas, which makes your person sacred and gives you the right to veto laws. On top of that, as Pontifex Maximus, you control the state's religion. If you're in the middle of one, your empire is likely being crushed by barbarian invasions and rebellions. It feels like endless war. You have to rush from one border to another, fighting Goths and Vandals to keep them out of Italy. Then you must march east and west to take back territories that were once yours, but were conquered or broke away from the empire. If you manage to stitch these pieces back together, you might earn the title Restitutor Orbis, the restorer of the world. However, being the Roman emperor doesn't come just with military problems. You have to fix the state itself. If the money is worthless, you must recall the bad currency and mint new coins with guaranteed silver. You also have to feed the capital. Under the Cura Annonai, you might start giving out free bread, olive oil, salt, and pork instead of just grain to keep the people happy. To bring your diverse subjects together, you might promote one main god, like the sun god Sol Invictus, and demand to be called Dominus et Deus, which means master and God. You may even be forced to build giant walls around Rome, admitting as the capital is no longer safe. Even with these wins, your position is terrifyingly weak. Since there is no clear rule for who comes next, every general is a potential rival. You have to keep the soldiers happy, since being too strict might trigger a rebellion, but being too permissive might let them gain too much power or make them think you're too weak and try to overthrow you. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord.